Frankly, if anybody thinks in South Africa that you can take the land without compensation, you're living in a dream. Let me put it quite frankly to you. If you want to start a civil war in South Africa, do that. Do that. And I told you before, that don't misjudge.
It's decidedly
what are you raising, honourable member?
On a point of order.
On which rule, honourable member?
The rule that establishes point of order, you know what is the rule. But the point of order is, he can't stand there and threaten civil war for a radical program of land occupation. It's not parliamentary to threaten civil war. If you want civil war, don't threaten it there.
Thank you. I think honourable member.
You must never threaten civil war. You know nothing about war.
Honourable member, thank you. Your point has been made. Thank you.
In this particular parliament, please.
Thank you.
South Africa, the most unequal country in the world, based on race due to apartheid's long-standing racial segregation policies, is at a crossroads. A storm is brewing following President Cyril Ramaphosa's signing of the Land Expropriation Bill into law. The debate surrounding this legislation has evoked strong emotions, deep divisions, and heated arguments. Opinions vary widely, with some comparing it to Zimbabwe's controversial land reform under Robert Mugabe, while others see it as a necessary step towards justice and equality. Calls for the government to seize land held by white South Africans have placed significant pressure on President Ramaphosa's government. For white farmers, these calls for expropriation without compensation echo the violence of government-mandated land seizures in Zimbabwe nearly 2 decades ago. Many fear South Africa could face similar economic devastation as its northern neighbour. The debate over land reform stirs deep anxieties, often clouded by misinformation. However, it is important to examine the facts. Land expropriation without compensation is not new to South Africa. In 1913, the Native Land Act was passed, reserving 87% of arable land for white South Africans and forcing black South Africans onto reserves where they had no individual ownership rights. This policy devastated black livelihoods, and today, not enough has changed. Of all agricultural land owned by individuals, 72% is still in the hands of white South Africans, who make up just 9% of the population. In contrast, black South Africans, who constitute 79% of the population, own only 4% of this land. Nelson Mandela once pledged that 30% of land held by white South Africans would be distributed to poor black citizens after apartheid. However, progress on land reform has been agonizingly slow. Land reform is inherently disruptive, often viewed as a Robin Hood approach, where the government redistributes land from the relatively well-off to the poor. Historical examples highlight both the potential benefits and risks of such policies. In 1949, after China's Communist Revolution, the government redistributed land from landlords to 300 million people, resulting in significant violence, but also a dramatic increase in grain output, up to 70% in a decade. Conversely, South Korea, in the 1950s, pursued land reform peacefully, buying private farms and distributing them to 1.6 million small landowners. Taiwan also experienced successful reforms during the same period, demonstrating that well-executed land reform can support economic growth and strengthen democracy. However, Zimbabwe offers a cautionary tale. Under Robert Mugabe, violent land seizures targeted white landowners, and redistributed land often went to political cronies. This resulted in severe economic hardships, though some argue the long-term outcomes were more nuanced. For example, The forced removal of 2,000 white tobacco farmers initially reduced production, but over time, tens of thousands of black farmers took their place, eventually improving output and creating livelihoods. South Africa's new expropriation bill seeks to address these historical injustices. Repealing the 1975 Expropriation Act, the bill aligns with Section 25 of the Constitution, which permits expropriation for public purposes or in the public interest, provided it is just and equitable. Notably, the bill introduces provisions for nil compensation under specific conditions. While critics argue this threatens property rights and could undermine investor confidence, supporters view it as a long overdue measure to promote inclusivity and economic participation for marginalized groups. The bill includes safeguards, such as negotiations with property owners and the right to dispute decisions through mediation or the courts. However, concerns remain about potential misuse of power and the ambiguity surrounding nil compensation. Opposition parties and interest groups fear these issues could lead to legal battles and slow down land reform efforts. The political landscape is further complicated by strong rhetoric. In 2017, Freedom Front Plus leader Peter Groenewald warned that expropriation without compensation could spark civil war, stating, "If anybody thinks in South Africa that they can take the land without compensation, you're living in a dream. Let me put it quite frankly to you. If you want to start a civil war in South Africa, do that." Despite the divisions, the case for land reform is not just moral, it is also economic and political. Properly executed, land reform can build a middle class, reduce inequality, and foster democracy. While comparisons to Zimbabwe are inevitable, South Africa's approach must account for the unique complexities of its past and present. Public sentiment on the expropriation bill is deeply polarized. Social media platforms are alive with debates over property rights, land security, and economic implications. Yet, there is also widespread support for land reform as a tool for social justice. Ultimately, whether the expropriation bill is seen as an opportunity or a threat depends on its implementation. With proper checks and balances, it has the potential to address historical injustices, promote economic empowerment, and create a more equitable society. However, the road ahead is fraught with challenges, and South Africans must remain informed and engaged as this pivotal legislation unfolds.